So I think we're on the very bottom of Lamed Gimel Amid Beis. We'll start again from about 10 lines up from the bottom on 33b 3, the second column, the second paragraph. So that we were saying that if one person stole it on Shabbos and a different person shechted, they're chayev. So the question is, is it possible that one person's doing an avera and the other one is getting the punishment for it? Meaning, how could the guy who stole it on Shabbos also have to pay the money just because he wasn't the one who shechted it? He stole it and he told someone else to shecht it. So a few answers. One answer is Amar Rabbah. Rabbah says Amar Achmana. The pasuk says Utvacha Omacharo, and he butchers it or sells it. Just like if you would sell the stolen animal to someone else, there has to be someone else involved. So too, there's a case where it's getting butchered or shechted through someone else, and yet you are liable. Just like you couldn't sell it to yourself, you're obviously selling it to a third party. So even if a third party is the one who shechts it, you, the thief, are liable. So even though he stole it on Shabbos, and you can't be chayav for or whatever the act of the theft and the shechita happened at the same time, whatever, but because someone else did the action that he told them to, so he could pay because he didn't do the avera. But it seems that Rabbah is saying that you can get that you'll have to pay for it, even though you're already getting the death penalty for breaking Shabbos. Oh, no. It's not stealing it. It's that the act of shechita itself is breaking Shabbos, not the act of stealing it. Sorry, my mistake. That's what it was a couple weeks ago. You stole it. Let's say you stole on Friday. And Shabbos, you tell someone, you say shecht it. So the act of shechita on Shabbos is death penalty. And the fact that it has now been shechted, the thief is obligated now to pay 4 or 5 times the value of the animal. It depends if it's a large animal or a small animal. Small animal is 4 times, large animal is 5 times. So he's chayav for the death penalty for Shabbos and the payment at the same time. The Vei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel taught Ol Rabbi says shliach, because the pasuk says utvacho o macharo, you butcher it or you sell it. So the word o includes a shliach, your agent. Involvement can obligate you to pay the extra payment for the steal for when you shech this stolen animal. The Chizkiya Tana, the yeshiva of Chizkiya taught tachas Rabbah says shliach. The word tachas, so it says you have to pay four times the value. Tachas, literally tachas means underneath, but in this case it means in place of 5 times in place of an ox, 4 times in place of a sheep. So it didn't have to say the word tachas. It should have said Chamisha Bakar Yishalem Lashor. You'll pay 5 times for an ox and 4 times and 4 sheep in place of a sheep. So how come it had to say the word in place of? So that includes that even if you didn't necessarily do it yourself, but you're responsible to pay in place of. Marzutra asked against this. Is it possible that someone, if he would have shechted it himself, he would not have had to pay the money? Because why wouldn't he have to pay the money? Because he already has a death penalty, and you don't have a death penalty and thing. But this is according, because Reish Lakish's answer here, we're in the middle of Reish Lakish's answer. Reish Lakish has explained the contradiction between our Mishnah and the Mishnah in Makos. So in this case, it seems that you pay the knas and you get a death penalty. That's what our Mishnah is talking about. So Reish Lakish is answering it's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Rabbi Meir holds you can get 2 punishments. So, okay, Rabbi Meir agrees you can get, Rabbi Meir's opinion is that you can get 2 punishments, whether lashes and monetary or death penalty and a monetary payment. But that would make sense if you yourself could get both punishments. But does it ever make sense that you would tell your agent to do it? If you would do it yourself, you wouldn't get punished, because Rabbi Meir agrees the rule of kamle b'Rabbah. Well, no, is it possible that if he would have done it itself, he wouldn't be obligated? But his agent would do it and he would become liable? How come? Usually you're better than your agent. Here, in this case, if you would have done it yourself, you only gotten 1 punishment. Now that you have your agent doing it, you're getting 2 punishments. So it doesn't make sense that you're going to be more liable when you have an agent do it than if you do it yourself. So iu lav mishum de lo mechayev. So the Gemara says, well, it's not that he is not obligated to pay for it. Ela mishum de kamle b'Rabbah minei. It's just that the principle of getting 1 punishment, the more serious punishment, that means that he's obligated to pay for it, but because of the principle of kamle b'Rabbah minei, he doesn't, because you can only get 1 punishment. So when your agent does it, you're not doing the 2 averos at the same time, so therefore you can get 2 punishments. But again, from this line, I think I mentioned last time, it sounds like the Meiri's opinion. The Meiri says if there's a case where you would have been obligated to pay, but because you're getting a different punishment, Beis Din can't obligate you. If the victim would somehow get a hold of your money, Beis Din would let him keep it. Meaning that according to the Meiri, in this case, you are obligated to pay. It's just that Beis Din can't enforce it. If the people took it into their own hands, then Beis Din say they get to keep it once they already have it. Beis Din couldn't tell you to give it to them. So this makes it sound like he is obligated. But we mentioned that the Amshel Shlomo, the Marshal, he holds not, and he says that if the victim would get the money, Beis Din would make him return it. Okay, so back in the Gemara, so if the reason that the person is obligated to pay, he gets the death penalty and he has to pay the restitution for the killed animal because someone else is the one who's shechting it, why would the Rabbanan argue on Rabbi Meir, and why would the Rabbanan say, the Chachamim say, that you don't have to pay? What's the reason the Rabbanan who say that you are exempt from paying the money? So the Gemara says, Man Chachamim, when it said Chachamim, Rabbi Shimon he. That's not the Chachamim in the plural. It's one opinion. It's one opinion who is called Chachamim, but in this case, it's really Rabbi Shimon. Because Rabbi Shimon holds a shechita that doesn't make the animal permitted to be eaten is not considered a shechita. And therefore, well, the Gemara is going to analyze the cases, but so let's just, it'll make more sense if we do the next line. So that makes sense if we're talking about you tell your agent to shecht it for an avodah zara, or it's a shora niskal. It's an axe that the Beis Din put to death because it had killed people. So that animal, you're not allowed to eat no matter who shechts it. So Rabbi Shimon holds in that case, since when you slaughter an animal for avodah zarah, it becomes like avodah zarah, and it's not just treif. You can't even give it to your dog. Once it's done something for avodah zarah, you can't get any benefit from it. So, shechting, the act of shchita on something which was shechted for avodah zarah, the shchita isn't considered a good shchita at all. So therefore, you wouldn't be obligated to pay the 4 or 5 times because this animal isn't considered shechted. However, shechting on Shabbos is a good shchita. Ditnan, because we learned in the Mishnah, if you shechted on Shabbos or on Yom Kippur, even though you have a death penalty for that, because on Shabbos it's one of the 39 malachos, you'll get skila, and on Yom Kippur those same things are prohibited, but you don't get skila, you get kares. So even though you got yourself a death penalty for shechting it, shchita kshera, it is considered a kosher shchita, and the animal can be eaten. So Rabbi Shimon's opinion would explain if you shechting it on Shabbos for avodah zarah, or if it was an axe that had been condemned by Beis Din to death. But shechting it on Shabbos, it is a good shechita. So how does that work? So the Gemara says, "Savar Rabbi Yochanan Asandler, Rabbi Shimon, this opinion would agree with Rabbi Yochanan Asandler. The Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa, Hamavashal b'Shabbos. So this is an important halacha. The Rishonim here don't talk about it that much, I think, because they talk about it in Shabbos, or in looks like it's in Chulin. Oh no, I'm looking in the wrong place here. Yeah, it is in Shabbos and Chulin and other places. So Hamavashal b'Shabbos, what happens if someone cooked on Shabbos? B'shogeg yochal, b'mezil lo yochal. If he cooked accidentally, he's allowed to eat it. B'mezil lo yochal. If he cooked on Shabbos intentionally, he's not allowed to eat it. That's the Tanakh, Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'shogeg yochal motzei Shabbos. If you cooked by accident, you're allowed to eat it after Shabbos. B'mezil lo yochal olamas. If you did it on purpose, you're never allowed to eat the food. So Rabbi Yehuda is stricter, and his opinion is if you cooked on Shabbos, you get punished in order to make you know that it's a very serious thing. You're punished for the fact that if you did it on purpose, you're never allowed to eat the food, and if you did it accidentally, you can't eat it on Shabbos. You have to wait till after Shabbos. Now, Rabbi Yochanan Asandler Omer b'shogeg yochal motzei Shabbos lacherim v'lo lo. Rabbi Yochanan Asandler says, if you cooked it accidentally on Shabbos, it can be eaten after Shabbos to other people, but you're not allowed to eat it at all. And Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says if it was done on purpose, it can never be eaten by him or by anyone else. So there's 3 opinions here. Tosfos points out. So Rabbi Meir holds if you cooked on Shabbos accidentally, you can eat it. You could eat it on Shabbos, and if you did it on purpose, you cannot eat it. Rabbi Yehuda says if you did it accidentally, you could eat it after Shabbos, and if you did it on purpose, you can never eat it. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says if you cooked accidentally, you could eat it. Other people can eat it after Shabbos, but not you. And if you did it on purpose, no one can ever eat it. Tosfos says here, I don't think all Rishonim agree, is that for all 3 of these opinions, cooking it on purpose is more strict than cooking it accidentally. But Tosfos holds is that the on purpose of Rabbi Meir is the same status as accidentally according to Rabbi Yehuda, and on purpose of Rabbi Yehuda is the same as the accidental to Rabbi Yochanan Asandler. So when Rabbi Meir says if you did it on purpose, you can't eat it. Rabbi Yehuda says b'shogeg you could eat it after Shabbos. So that's how Tosos explains it. So Tosos explains it when Rabbi Meir says you can't eat it, it means you can't eat it on Shabbos, but you could eat it after Shabbos. Well, here I'll give you an example. So let's say that you thought that you had the schnitzel, then you were putting the schnitzel on the blach, and let's say you put a brisket with gravy on the blach. So you're allowed to warm up dry food. You put on a liquid food. So because you didn't take the foil off the pot to see what was in there, or off the pan to see what was in there. So that's how I would say was bishoge. Or maybe let's say you had a radiator and you turned the radiator off before Shabbos, and then on Shabbos you took the food out of the oven and you put it on the radiator. I mean, you took it out of the refrigerator and put it on the radiator. Lo and behold, after you turned it off before Shabbos, someone else turned it back on before Shabbos, and now the radiator's hot. So you put it on something that you expected to be cold for a good reason, and it ended up not being, and it ended up being hot. So those are two possible ways that you accidentally cooked on Shabbos. So is it so crazy?
No.
So now it doesn't sound so crazy, right? Okay. So that's how Tosos explains it. Rashi doesn't. Rashi explains it simply the way it sounds. So according to Rabbi Meir, if you cooked accidentally on Shabbos, you could eat it on Shabbos, but on purpose, you can never eat it. He holds it. Rabbi Meir holds you can never eat it, but other people can eat it after Shabbos. He actually doesn't say if other people could eat it on Shabbos or not. And Rabbi Yehuda says if you cooked it accidentally, you could eat it after Shabbos. So Rashi explicitly says the Chachamim they punished you. They made a knas, like a fine, but not a monetary fine. That because if they would say that you could eat it on Shabbos, people will do it on purpose and they'll say, "Oh, I did it accidentally. I can still eat it." So Chachamim say, "No, even if you did it accidentally, you can't eat it on Shabbos. So you can't make a trick and try to say I did it accidentally when really you did it on purpose, because it doesn't matter. You're not allowed to eat it on Shabbos anyway. And on purpose, you can never eat it, but only other people could eat it after Shabbos." Rashi doesn't say, but that's probably what he means. So also, just so you know, so Lamaisa, if something got cooked on Shabbos, we would paskin that you're not allowed to eat it immediately after Shabbos. You would have to wait the additional time that, like if it would take 50 minutes to cook this thing, you would have to wait 50 minutes after Shabbos before you could eat it. We call that, I think, b'chdei yasa, the amount of time it would have taken to cook it after Shabbos. So you can't cook it accidentally and then say, oh, as soon as Shabbos Havdalah is over, I could eat this pizza that I cooked. No, you have to wait longer, as if you would have spent the time to cook it after Shabbos. So it de-incentivizes people to do the Avera. So my time at Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler, what's the reason for Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler that if it was cooked on Shabbos, no Jew is ever allowed to eat it? Kidarish Rabbi Chia Pischa Devei Nasiya, as Rabbi Chia taught at the doorway of the house of the Nasi, Ushmartim es Shabbos ki kodesh yilachem. This is in Kisisa. Guard Shabbos because it's holy to you. So ma kodesh aser b'achila, just like holy things, stuff that people donated to the Beis Hamikdash, you're not allowed to eat because it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. Af ma'aser Shabbos aser b'achila. So too, anything that was cooked on Shabbos, you're not allowed to eat it. So meaning he's making a hekesh between Shabbos and Kachim. Just like you're never allowed to eat Kachim. Well, we're allowed to eat korban if it's ours, but if someone donated something to the Beis Hamikdash, it can't be eaten. So if something was cooked on Shabbos, you can't eat that either. So then the Gemara asks, Ima, or this is part of his drasha, Ima kodesh aser ba'na, af ma'aser Shabbos aser ba'na. But stuff that you donate to the Beis Hamikdash, you're allowed to have benefit from it, but you're not allowed to eat it. So does that mean that if you cooked on Shabbos, you're not allowed to have benefit from it either. Like, can you sell it to a non-Jew, or can you give it as a gift? So you're getting an intangible benefit of having given a gift and creating goodwill. Tamalomer lachem. No, it says ki kodesh lachem. It's holy for you. Shalachem yehe. It stays yours even though you did something wrong. Yachal afil b'shogeg. So maybe even if you did it accidentally, it remains yours. Tamalomar mechala mos yumas. The pasuk says those who desecrate it. Now we say the word mechala is desecrator, but I think more accurately, mechala comes from the word chol, and chol means they're not holy. We have Shabbos is holy, and the weekday is chol, right? So so mechala, those who treat it like it's a regular day and not holy, they would be put to death. The mezid amartiv lo b'shogeg. Because the whole pasuk says you should guard Shabbos because it's holy. Those who desecrate it will surely die, because whoever does malacha, and their soul will be cut off from the nation. So Shabbos is special that really you get a death penalty, but if you didn't get warning and death penalty, you're going to get kares for it, as opposed to Yom Kippur, that there is no based-in punishment for doing malacha on Yom Kippur. You only get kares. So mechala mos yumas, those who desecrate it get a death penalty. If you do it by accidentally, do you get a death penalty? No. So b'mezid amarti l'chavalo b'shogeg. So what I said is that when we compare Shabbos to kachim, that it's prohibited, is only as if it was done intentionally. That if you would get a death penalty for it, but if it was by accident, it's not prohibited to you. So when I talked about this, I was saying if you cooked on Shabbos, but from the context of the Gemara, what I said was not accurate. Because what did we do here? Here you did the malacha of killing on Shabbos. You shechted the animal. So since you shechted the animal on Shabbos, you can never use it. So Rabbi Yochanan Asandler says if it was shechted on Shabbos, you nor any other Jew can ever use it. So therefore, it's not considered a shechita. See, so the problem with the thing is, we don't pass the Rabbi Yochanan Asandler, but let's say you built a bench on Shabbos, or you built a house. Are you going to say that no Jew could ever live in the house? I mean, that's what we should say according to Rabbi Yochanan Asandler. Just like you can't cook on Shabbos, what we're saying here, if you shech the animal on Shabbos, you or no other Jew, intentionally, you or any other Jew cannot. So according to that, if you planted a seed on Shabbos, you should never be able to use what grows from that seed, according to Rabbi Yochanan Asandler. If you built a house, you should never be able to do anything with that house. It seems a little bit extreme. I'm not sure. Okay, pligi bar Rav Acha Ravina. There's a machlokas between Rav Acha and Ravina. Chadam or Ma'aseh Shabbos d'Oraisa, v'chadam or d'Rabbanan. So when we say that if you did this malach on Shabbos, you're never allowed to use it, is that a d'Oraisa din, or is it only a d'Rabbanan din? Man da Amar d'Oraisa kida Amran. The one who says that it's from the Torah says you're not allowed to get any benefit from what you did on Shabbos is kida Amran, like we just said, because they made a drasha from a pasuk. Man da Amar d'Rabbanan, the opinion who says that the penalties that you're not allowed to use something that was made from Shabbos desecration, that it's only d'Rabbanan. Amar kodesh he kodesh vein maseh kodesh. They learn that from the pasuk says ki kodesh he, Shabbos is holy. Shabbos is holy, but that which is done on Shabbos is not holy. So if you did something on Shabbos, that doesn't become prohibited on the Torah level. Only the Chachamim said that you're not allowed to get any benefit or you're not allowed to use it. I mean, I guess you can't get any benefit. Jews can't get any benefit, but I guess you could sell it to a non-Jew. It sounds like. Well, a different Jew can't use it either. Rabbi Yochanan's handles it. Right. So meaning because this was done on Shabbos, no one can partake of that. So you could sell to a goy and you get money. So that's removed from the actual malacha, so you're allowed to get that benefit from it. But you wouldn't even be allowed to sell to a Jew because that Jew can't get benefit. Well, I don't know if you could sell it to a Jew. The Jew can't use it. So I mean, how much is it worth to buy something that's not usable? I mean, once a few years ago, I brought a snowblower that wasn't working, but I brought it to the shop and they were able to fix it. So I took a risk that maybe, but it was cheap enough. I said, okay, if it doesn't work, I'm losing $100. Big whoop. But if it's worth it, this is an $800 snowblower that I get for $100 plus the cost of fixing it. So I don't know if you would sell it to a Jew who can't use it, if he would go turn around and sell it to a goy. I don't know. It wouldn't be prohibited to, but I don't know. But if you're selling something and you're being honest, this was cooked on Shabbos, so you cannot use it. So it's worth pennies on the dollar, I would think. Ulamanda Amar Durabanan Mai Tameo Durabanan de Patre. If the malacha that was done on Shabbos, let's say you cooked on Shabbos, you shechted on Shabbos. If the whole basis for that you're not allowed to use it is only rabbinic in nature, why would the Chachamim exempt you from paying? So on a Torah level, you could use this thing after Shabbos. So you did an avera, but why would the Chachamim say that you would not pay the 4 or 5 times for the animal for being shechted on Shabbos? So ki kapatri rabbanan ashara. No, so that's true. On Shabbos, you would have to pay. But the other 2 cases, if the guy shechted it for avodah zarah, or it was a shor haniskal, a shor that the Beis Din had condemned to death, then in those cases, Rabbanan say you wouldn't pay. But it's true that for Shabbos you would have to pay. Toveach lavodos kochav. Okay, so one of the cases from that brisa was if you shechted it for idol worship. So according to Rabbi Meir, even though you get a death penalty for doing avodah zarah, you still have to pay the money to the victim of who you stole it from. So the Gemara asks, Kevan sheshachat beporta isterle. Once you shechted it even a little bit, it becomes forbidden. So in regard to shechita, the halacha is for shechita you have to cut rove of the majority of both the windpipe and the esophagus of the animal. But it seems that the halacha for avodah zarah, but for avodah zarah, the halacha is the Gemara Chulin Daf Mem Rashi says that Rashi says once you shechted either the windpipe or the esophagus, it becomes avodah zarah. It's forbidden because of avodah zarah. So our Gemara says porta a little bit, but it doesn't literally mean a little bit, but it means it's still an incomplete shechita. If it was a Jew shechting like that for eating, it wouldn't be a full shechita. Does that make sense? So avodah zarah is stricter. Cutting that much for Jewish shechita is not considered shechita, but for avodah zarah, it's considered as if you brought the animal for avodah zarah and it's already well, it's not kosher, but the question is every avera has an amount. So what's the amount of shechita that you do when you're shechting an animal for avodah zarah that is considered avodah zarah? So even though if you were a Jew shechting it to eat, you have to cut the majority of both pipes. If you're a Jew doing avodah zarah, I don't know about a goy for avodah zarah. Maybe it's the same thing because goyim aren't allowed to worship. This one of the Shiva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. They could worship a monotheistic God, or according to some opinions, they could worship a monotheistic God together with something else. but paganism is not allowed from the Shiva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. So the amount that, meaning, and also for Shabbos, we know that for every malacha, there's an amount that you do. Like if you write one letter on Shabbos, you don't violate the malacha, because the amount of writing on Shabbos is 2 letters, right? Not WRITE, but when we learned Hilchos Shabbos a long time ago, we went through all the malachos and said, what is the minimum amount that you have to do to be liable for the death penalty? So for every avera, there's an amount. Meaning, if you eat treif, you're not. I mean, for all these averas, you can't do any amount of it, but there's a certain amount that once you do that amount, you get punished for it. So what's the amount that you get punished once you shech the animal for avodah zarah as a sacrifice for idolatry? The answer is you shech the esophagus or the windpipe. That's considered shechting an animal for avodah zarah. Even though shechting that amount for a Jew, for shechting an animal to eat, that wouldn't be considered shechita. So the shechita for avodah zarah is a different definition of shechita for eating. So once it already became forbidden when you shechted one of the pipes, when you shech the other pipe, meaning either the esophagus or the trachea, lav demare katavach. He's no longer shechting the animal from the thief who owned it. Meaning, when something is worshipped as avodah zarah, it becomes completely forbidden. So once this animal was shechted halfway, it already became considered avodah zarah. Once it became avodah zarah, it's now worthless. So now that it's worthless, it's not considered a property of the thief who was its owner. So how could the thief have to pay 4 or 5 times the value of the animal when someone else shechted it for avodah zarah? Because when it became shechted, it wasn't his anymore because it was worthless. So Amar Rava ba'omer bigmar zvicha hu ovda. So Rava says this is talking about a case where this avodah zarah was you have to completely shech the animal. So when you only shechted just the windpipe or just the esophagus, that wasn't the avodah zarah yet. So this is a case where a kosher shechita, where the definition of shechita for eating and the definition of shechita for avodah zarah is the same exact definition. Shor niskal. Okay, so the third case in the brisa, if it was a shor that Beis Din gave a death penalty to, lav didehu katavach. Again, because Beis Din had given it a death penalty, it's not of any value because it's about to be put to death. No one could use it. No one could do anything, so it has no value. So it wouldn't be considered yours. So how come you would have to pay 4 or 5 times if you shechted it to the owner if you shechted it on Shabbos? The same type of question as we just asked about the animal being offered for avodah zarah. So Amar Rabbah says, so it's a slightly irregular case. What was the case here? Ruvain owns the ox. Ruvain deposited it to Shimon to watch. So Shimon is a shomer. When it was under the custodianship of Shimon, that's when this animal killed, and the Beis Din judged it and gave it a death penalty while it was still in the custodianship of Shimon the shomer. Ugnavo ganav mi bei shomer, and a thief stole it from Shimon the shomer's house or property. Rabbi Meir Savalek Rabbi Yaakov Savalek Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Meir, who holds that you could be chayav the death penalty for Shabbos, for shechting it on Shabbos, and the monetary payment for shechting a stolen animal, he also holds like Rabbi Yaakov, and he also holds like Rabbi Shimon. So Savar like Rabbi Yaakov, he holds like Rabbi Yaakov, the Amar Af Mishanigmar Dino Hechaziru Shomer Lebalav Muchzar. Rabbi Yaakov holds is that even though this animal did the damage and was judged by Beis Din while it was in the shomer, the custodian's possession, if the custodian would then return it to Ruvain, the real owner, it's considered that the shomer returned the object which was placed in his trust. Meaning, so Ruvain asked Shimon, you be a shomer, you watch my thing. So Shimon eventually has to return it, right? Because it's not Shimon's object, it's really Ruvain's object that Shimon's watching. So Rabbi Yaakov holds that even when the animal which was entrusted to Shimon the shomer was a perfectly good animal and it hadn't killed anyone or anything at that time, but if it killed while it was in the shomer's rishus and Beis Din gave it a death penalty, but it didn't, obviously they didn't carry out the death penalty yet, and then Shimon returns it to Ruvain, Shimon is considered as if he did his duty in regard to watching the animal, and he has returned it back to Ruvain. So in this case, even though it's worthless, it does have some value in the fact that the shomer is considered as if he returned the object to the depositor, to Ruvain, who had placed it in the care, the shomership of Shimon. The Savar like Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir also like Rabbi Shimon, the Amr Davar Hagorim Lamamon Kamamon Dami. That something which causes some type of monetary something is considered like money. So even though this animal is worthless, meaning if Shimon didn't return the animal to Ruvain, what would Shimon have to do? Shimon would have to pay the value of a regular animal back to Ruvain. So because he returned it, he's considered as if he returned the object that was placed into his custodianship. So this animal, even though it has a death penalty on its head, it's considered a davar hagorim lamamo. It's something which causes a monetary thing, and something which could cause a monetary obligation or the lack of a monetary obligation. It's considered that you paid it back. It is like money. So even though this Shara Niskal is about to be put to death, in this case with the shomer, it does have a monetary value. And therefore, Rabbi Meir holds, because he holds like Rabbi Yaakov, and he holds like Rabbi Shimon, he's chayav misa for shechting on Shabbos, and he's also obligated to pay the monetary compensation 4 or 5 times because the thief stole shechted on Shabbos, and he has to pay a monetary obligation. Rabbah Amar, Rabbah says, so even though we just had Rabbah's answering a different question right now. Rabbah's answering how come Rabbi Meir would say you're chayav death penalty and the monetary payment. Rabbah Amar Leon b'tebel chaydei atzmo. So the answer we just gave, or that we started talking about last week, is when the thief tells someone else to shecht it. But Rabbi gives a different answer. The thief himself shechted this animal on Shabbos. We go to Lamed Daled Amud Beis. Rabbi Meir Lok Mishalem Islay Meisu Mishalem Leislay. Rabbi Meir holds, when Rabbi Meir holds you can get 2 punishments, he only holds that you can get lashes and a monetary payment, but he does not hold that you can get a death penalty and monetary payment. Now, we saw last week that I think it was Reish Lakish held that you could. Yeah, so that was on Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, about 20 lines up from the bottom. There was a 2 dots Reish Lakish. We said over there that Rabbi Meir definitely holds that you can, not just that you can get lashes and monetary payment, but you could also get a death penalty and monetary payment. Rabbah is arguing on Reish Lakish about that, and Rabbah is saying that Rabbi Meir only holds you can get lashes and a death and monetary payment, but not death penalty and a monetary payment. So in this case, if someone stole the animal on Shabbos and shechted it, or he shechted it for avodah zarah, excuse me, I have to finish reading the answer. So in general, Rabbi Meir holds you cannot get a death penalty and money. However, v'shani hani dechidushu shechit shator b'knas. But these three cases are different, that you do have to pay and get a death penalty. Dechidushu shechit shator b'knas. It's an innovative thing. A chiddush is a new thing, so it's an innovative thing that the Torah said in regard to paying a fine. Afagav de mikdal mishalem. Even though that you're getting a death penalty, you have to pay the fine. Meaning, there's a fundamental difference between paying back a principal for something and paying back something that's more than the principal. So if you stole an object and you still have it, you return it and you don't have to pay anything else. You return the stolen property. But if you shechted it, let's say, then you have to pay 4 or 5. So one of those 4 or 5 is for the actual value of the animal, and 3 or 4 times the value, meaning let's say the animal's worth $100. So, and let's say it was a cow. So that's a big animal. So you have to pay $500 back. Of the $500 you have to pay, 100 is for the principal of the cow itself. So that's just straight up monetary compensation. The other $400 are a knas. I guess I don't think it's appropriate to call it punitive damages, but in tort law that we have in this country, you have the actual damages and the punitive damages. So there's an analogy. It's not perfectly analogous, but when you in halacha, there are some things that are the actual damages, and what we wouldn't call punitive, but we call it knas, a fine. So there's a fundamental. So for example, there's a halacha that moda b'knas pater. If you admit that you stole something and you shechted it and sold it, so you'd be obligated to pay the $500. If witnesses would have come and said that we saw him steal it, and other witnesses came and said we saw him shechted and sell it, or shechted or sell it, because the witnesses testified, he would be obligated to pay the fine. But if he admitted to Beis Din, I shechted it, then his admission exempts him from paying the fine. So there's a big halachic differences between the principal, or what we call the actual damages, versus the knas, the fine. So when Rabbi Meir holds you can't get death penalty and pay, that's that you cannot get a death penalty and pay the actual damages, the principle of the monetary damages. But knas, because knas itself is a new halacha I wouldn't have known by myself, meaning it's pretty makes sense. If you stole something, you have to pay it back. So to pay that monetary thing, the fact that Torah says you have to pay it back, that's not a chiddush. But the amounts of the damages, or the requirement to pay above the actual damage, that's a chiddush. That's something that I wouldn't know without the Torah telling me. So that the Torah always requires you to pay, even if you get a death penalty. That's Rabbah's answer. Yeah, Jeff.
What if the thief returns the animal alive?
So then he doesn't have to pay anything else. He doesn't have to pay. He doesn't have to pay any money. No. There's a halacha of kefal, of double, but I think that's if he doesn't return it and they find him with it, then he has to pay double. So meaning he repays it, he gives back the cow, and he has to pay an additional value of the cow on $100. Right, he just has to return it. And also and he wouldn't even get lashes, because the halacha is, I think, did we learn that? We spoke about Edom Zomimim. No, we didn't talk about this. We spoke about a few weeks ago about Edom Zomimim and hitting someone else. But there's a machlokas and makos. I think Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is to the contrary, but the way we paskin is that for a negative commandment, if you could give monetary restitution, it's the term in the Gemara is lav hanita klase. If there's a negative commandment, but it can be rectified by fulfilling a positive commandment, you don't get lashes. So since we're not allowed to steal something, but there's a halacha, the heishavas exela, there's a mitzvah to return the stolen object. So because if you return the stolen object, you're exempt from lashes. So yeah, if someone say he stole the animal, he comes and says, yes, here it is, I return it, he returns it, and that's it. He doesn't have to pay anything else. If he's denying it and then they go to his house or his field and they find that the animal's there, then he has to pay double. And if he shachted it or sold it to someone else, then he has to pay either 4 times or 5 times. But the one time would be for the actual damages for the cow itself, and then the 3 or 4 times the additional would be a knas, which we usually translate as a fine, and it is somewhat analogous to what we would call punitive damages in tort law. Is everyone with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So Rabbi Meir holds you can get 2 punishments, but in general, you can't get death penalty and monetary payment. But if that monetary payment is a fine over and above the damage caused, then Rabbi Meir holds you do pay it because of the novelty. The Torah said we wouldn't have known this without ourselves. So there's no exception or exemption from paying that fine. Va'az Rabbah l'tamei, and Rabbah's answer here in interpreting Rabbi Meir follows a different logic or opinion that Rabbah had. The Amar Rabbah hayigidi ganuv lo utvacha b'Shabbos. If someone had already stolen a kid, a little goat, chad gadya, and then he shechted it on Shabbos, chayev, he has to pay for a small animal, it's a 4 times payment, because he already was obligated to make restitution for the theft before the prohibition of Shabbos came, because that's when he stole it before Shabbos. However, ganav v'tavach b'Shabbos, if he stole it and shechted it on Shabbos, he's exempt from paying the 4 times restitution. She'im ein gneva ein tvicha ein mechira, because if he wouldn't have stolen it, he couldn't have shechted it or sold it. And since the gneva itself happened on Shabbos, it's all considered, I guess, of having happened on Shabbos. So it's one action. The Amar Rabbah, and Rabbah says, machteres. What if you had previously stolen a gedi and then you shechted it in a machteres? So machteres is you were tunneling into someone's house to steal from him. So machteres is a very important halacha, or very special halacha, because hababa machteres mischai benavsho. The homeowner is allowed to kill him. From the fact that with the halacha is, if someone's willing to tunnel into your house, he's willing to kill you too if he would encounter you. So if you catch a guy tunneling into your house, you're allowed to kill him. So hayigidi ganuv lo tvacha b'machteres. So I think if on the next page in note 8, there's a machlokas here. So let me explain it one way, but it's not the only way to explain it. This makes it sound like someone stole a goat, chad gadya, and then he took the goat with as he was tunneling in to break into someone else's house. So because he has forfeit his life, because when you're tunneling in, if the guy catches you, he can kill you. his act, and then so while he's in the tunnel, he shechts this goat. He becomes exempt from having to pay the owner of the goat. He's exempt from having to pay the owner of the goat because he's doing this in a case where he himself is getting a death penalty. Even though the shechita and the tunneling are independent things, it's just coincidental that he's doing them at the same time. But because he's liable to a death penalty, a human death penalty, but not a based in death penalty, I think if you go as based in should I kill the machteres, it's probably too late. You find him tunneling, you kill him. It's kind of like Pinchas. You see Baal Aramis, Kanoim Pogabo. You can't ask. If you ask, they tell you no. But if it's happening, B'Shas Ma'isa, someone could kill you. Basin doesn't kill you, the homeowner there would kill you. So Hagedi Ganavlov Tvava Bachteres, he'd already previously stolen a little goat, and he shefted it when he was tunneling into someone else's chayev. He does have to pay the 4-time penalty, because he stole it previously, and now he's doing a separate act of tunneling into someone's house. So even though the act of to pay the 4 or 5, that obligation doesn't happen until he actually shefts it, but it's connected to the act of theft. Because if you didn't steal it, you wouldn't have to pay the 4 or 5 times. In this case, as a kid, so you don't have to pay 4 times when you shecht it. Ganav v'tavach b'machteres, if you stole it and shefted it in the tunnel, you're exempt. She'im ein gneva ein tvicha ve'ein machira, because if you wouldn't have stolen it, if you wouldn't have to pay 4 or 5 times for selling it or shechting it. Now, in this case, you're not selling it when you're in the machteres. Now, if you posted it on eBay or and someone buys it immediately, would that be considered machira? No, because according to halacha, for metaltalin, for movable property, you don't acquire it by paying. You would have to do it by giving it over or by the other guy leading it to him. So if you're in the tunnel and the other guy isn't, it's still yours, even if you entered a contractual obligation while you're in the tunnel. But it just uses the word tevecha o mechira because normally, because the halacha says if you shechted it or sold it, you have to pay 4 or 5 times. But in this case, we're only talking about shechting it. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so if somebody sells it in shop,
Yeah.
alive,
Yeah.
still death penalty?
It would be the same. Oh, so the thing is, if you sold it, so it's a good point. So to sell it, you're not violating a malacha.
What? Oh, yeah.
Right. So shefting it, you're violating a malacha.
Yeah.
Business is asur midrabanan. To hold money, might be muktzah, but it's not one of the 39 malachos. So to sell it on Shabbos, you wouldn't there wouldn't be a death penalty. So the only death penalty is if you shafted it on Shabbos. So again, in this case, it's important to point out, thank you for reminding us about that case, is that it's only talking about if you would have shafted it.
But if you sell and got money, you need to pay like 4 or 5 times?
Yeah, but that's simple because he doesn't have a death penalty. Obviously, you would have to make restitution. Utsricha, and we need both cases. We need the case of Shabbos and we need the case of machteres. So before we go on, if you look in note 8 here, it seems to be a machlokas rishonim. Are you tunneling? Does it have to be tunneling on the way in, or can it even be while you're tunneling on the way out? Is there a death penalty? According to Rashi and most opinions, it sounds like there would be no death. That the person isn't liable to death when he's in the tunnel leaving his scene of the crime. So the Ravid is in the middle of the second paragraph in 8. It says Rashi, according to this opinion, says Rashi would follow the Ravid in Hilchos Geneva that one may kill a burglar who is tunneling even if he's in the process of leaving the house. Rambam maintains that once the burglar has turned around to leave, he may not be killed since the life of the homeowner is no longer in danger. Now the Ravid argues on the Rambam. It's not clear what the Ravid says. So often case, it's not clear what the Ravid's asking, but that's how they learn what the Ravid is. So I explained it tunneling in because that would seem to be, according to all opinions, the simplest way to talk about the case of tunneling. But be aware that Shita Mugvetzes doesn't understand Rashi that way. We need the case of Shabbos and the tunneling burglar. Dias minan Shabbos mishum disur isur olam. I might think that Shabbos has its own din because Shabbos is a permanent isur. It's always usur to shachtan Shabbos. Aval machteres to isur shahu, but machteres is only a temporary. Only at the time that he's tunneling is he liable to a death penalty. Aim alo. I might say that that he would have to pay, and he would have to pay the money, and even though he's liable to a death penalty because it's only a temporary death penalty. So a permanent death penalty could push off a monetary obligation, but this temporary, as he's tunneling, wouldn't. So Rabbah says it does. The Iashmin and machteres, and if Rabbah only taught us the case of the tunneling, I would say the machteres zuhi hasraso. You don't need to be warned if you are tunneling into someone's house. You literally take your life into your own hands, and he'd kill you. So in that case, Aval Shabbos debaya hasra emalo. But I might say Shabbos, since you need a warning, you're in full knowledge that it's Shabbos and this, so you are willingly offering yourself to pay back, even though you have a death penalty. Tzricha. Therefore, we needed both cases. Now, I'm sorry, I can't go any longer. So we only covered an amud and a half. A little less than it. So at Amar of Papa. Okay, next week, no share because it's Erev Tisha B'Av. And according to the Ramah, we're not supposed to learn regular stuff Erev Tisha B'Av, but also we have to get ready for our fast. So no share next week, and God